The night began with the sea whispering secrets against the glass walls of the cafe. Candlelight shimmered between them, slicing through the comfortable lie of romance. His smile looked rehearsed. Her laugh trembled. Just once. Too thin to be real. The air smelled of salt and rain. But something else too. Metal, maybe fear. How could one date feel both intimate and dangerous? How could the eyes across the table seem to know everything she'd never told a soul? Outside, thunder stalked the horizon. But inside, silence was sharper than lightning. A phone vibrated unseen, ignored. Their hands brushed over the menu and she flinched at how cold his skin was. Somewhere deep in that night, something had already gone wrong. They just hadn't realized it yet. They walked along the wet pavement as the storm eased to drizzle. Small talk filled the air, empty and heavy. He spoke of travel and art, but his words sounded like lines rehearsed 100 times. She laughed softly, a sound too careful to be genuine. Every time she tried to steer the conversation to something real, he redirected it. A pattern formed. Charm layered over control. When their hands brushed again, she noticed how steady his pulse was compared to hers. The glow of the cafe behind them faded, and in its place, the darkness of the sea grew louder. Somewhere between the words and the wind, she knew this wasn't just a bad date. It was something else entirely. He told a story about a photo he took in another city, a lie she recognized instantly. The details didn't fit. The skyline didn't match, but she smiled anyway. Pretending felt safer than confronting. The rain returned in misty bursts, softening the air but not the tension. She wanted to turn back to say goodnight, but his easy tone disarmed her again. Just one more stop, he said. The words slipped out like a promise or a trap. Back inside the cafe, Maya wiped down their empty table. Her eyes lingered on the untouched dessert, the forgotten scarf. Something about their energy had chilled the air even after they left. Outside, the wind carried faint laughter, or maybe it was just the sea. She locked the door and drew the blinds, unaware of the scarf's embroidered name, Lena. The cliffs loomed dark and endless against the sea. The path was slick, the air electric with the last hints of thunder. "You'll love this view," he said. But the way he looked at her, it wasn't about the view. Each wave crashed harder, echoing her heartbeat. The cafe lights were far behind now, just a faint orange memory swallowed by the storm. And when he reached for her hand again, she hesitated. Somewhere below, the tide clawed at the rocks. Waiting, the rain thinned to a whisper as they walked along the narrow path, skirting the cliffs. The air carried the metallic scent of salt and storm. She tried to focus on the ocean, its rhythm steady and indifferent, but his voice kept pulling her back. He spoke about fear, how it could make people reveal who they really were. His tone was too casual, his eyes too sharp. When he laughed, it didn't sound like joy. It sounded like someone testing an echo. The ground grew slick beneath their steps, and the wind tugged at her hair. A shiver ran through her. Not from the cold, but from the feeling that she was walking beside a stranger who already knew she wouldn't run. He pointed toward the waves below, describing how storms cleanse the shore, how nature reclaims what doesn't belong. She nodded faintly, pretending to listen. Her mind replayed his earlier words, how he'd said he'd been here before, though she could tell he hadn't. Each step closer to the cliff felt heavier. The wind carried fragments of his words away, leaving silence sharp enough to cut. Somewhere down the coast, a lighthouse blinked. A lighthouse blinked. A lonely, rhythmic warning she wished she'd understood soon. A flash of lightning illuminated the world for one terrifying heartbeat. In that brief glow, she saw his face turned toward her, expression blank, watching her, not the sea. The wind howled, dragging her scarf into the air like a warning. He reached for it, slow, deliberate, before catching it mid-flight. "Careful," he said softly, wrapping it around her neck again. His fingers lingered just a moment too long. The scarf felt tighter than before. They stopped beneath an old street lamp where the road curved inland. The bulb flickered weakly, buzzing against the damp air. "You trust people too easily," he said. It was meant to sound playful, but something in his tone was almost disappointed. She wanted to ask why he thought that, why he cared. But her voice stayed trapped in her throat. The light dimmed again, and for a moment his eyes looked darker than the sea. When he suggested they go somewhere quiet, her stomach dropped. She laughed it off, pretending she hadn't heard the edge in his voice. He gestured toward a narrow dirt road leading into the woods, claiming it was a shortcut. She followed, one step, then another, every instinct screaming to turn back. The wind died. The sound of waves faded. All that remained was the crunch of gravel beneath their shoes and the growing weight of silence between them. The house appeared through the mist, perched on a rise above the cliffs, half swallowed by fog. Its windows glowed faintly, like tired eyes that had seen too much. He said it was his studio where he kept his work. She hesitated at the gate, her instincts flaring again, but his easy grin disarmed her. Inside, the air felt old, wood, salt, and something faintly metallic. Frames lined the walls, photos of faces she didn't recognize. Their smiles looked wrong, stretched too wide, their eyes all focused on her as though she'd arrived late to something terrible. Inside, shadows ruled. The walls were covered with black and white photographs, landscapes, portraits, strange close-ups of hands and faces. He moved easily through the space, every gesture claiming it. She stayed near the door, clutching her bag. "You can relax," he said, his voice low, the kind that made words sound like instructions. He poured 2 drinks, amber liquid catching the faint glow of a single lamp. "To first impressions," he said. She didn't raise her glass. He talked about photography, about the truth hidden between light and darkness. She nodded, trying to seem calm. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked to the hallway, to the framed photo hanging crooked, to the faint hum of something mechanical beyond it. When she reached for her phone, there was no signal. "Don't worry," he said, smiling. "It's just the cliffs. They block reception." His words sounded practiced. The silence after them felt rehearsed, too. He led her down a hallway lined with photographs. All women, each captured in mid-laughter, eyes glinting with something between joy and fear. "My muses," he said. His hand hovered just behind her back, guiding her forward. At the end of the hall, a locked door caught her attention. "Storage," he explained quickly, voice too smooth. When lightning flashed outside, the metal handle shimmered, and for the first time, she saw faint scratches around the keyhole. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. He handed her a photo, one of the women from the hallway. "She was brave," he said softly. "Stayed longer than the others." Her throat tightened. The woman in the picture looked eerily familiar. Same eyes, same smile. She set the photo down, hands trembling. He watched her closely, head tilted, expression unreadable. Then he said it, quiet, final. "I think you photograph beautifully too." The house seemed to breathe with every gust of wind. She excused herself to the bathroom, her footsteps muffled by old carpet. The hallway felt narrower now, the portraits seeming to watch her go. Inside the dim light of the bathroom, she steadied her shaking hands and stared at her reflection. Pale, foreign, eyes rimmed with fear. She needed a plan, an excuse, something to get out. Then she noticed it, a small framed photograph on the counter. A woman, smiling, wearing her same scarf. She slipped quietly into another room, heart pounding in her throat. The air smelled of dust and chemicals. Along the walls, shelves of film canisters gleamed faintly. On the table, dozens of photographs lay scattered, faces she'd seen in the hallway. All women. some laughing, some terrified. In the center of them lay a fresh print, still wet from developer solution, her own face, taken tonight. The glass of wine on the cafe table visible behind her shoulder. Russ! She backed away, nearly tripping over a stool. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway. Steady, unhurried. You shouldn't be in here. His voice floated through the darkness. Panic surged through her chest. She slipped behind a curtain, pressing herself against the cold wall. Through the narrow gap, she saw him step into the room, eyes scanning the table. He looked calm, almost curious. Then he reached down and tore her photograph in half. He spoke softly, almost tenderly, as he walked around the room. "They always leave too soon," he said. "You weren't supposed to find this yet." She tried not to breathe. He set the torn photo down, his hands trembling slightly for the first time. "You could have been different." His voice cracked on the last word. Lightning flashed through a small window, illuminating the streaks of dried chemicals on his arms, and something darker beneath. When he left the room, she slipped out, barefoot to keep quiet. Her heartbeat filled her ears. At the end of the hall, she found the locked door again. The scratches looked deeper now, almost desperate. She fumbled with the handle, but it wouldn't move. From behind her came a creak, floorboards complaining beneath his weight. She turned, eyes wide, breath trembling. "Looking for something?" he asked. The key hung from his hand. She ran before thinking. Pure instinct, pure terror. The hallway blurred into streaks of wood and shadow. Behind her, his footsteps followed in calm, measured rhythm. The sound far too composed for a man chasing someone. She turned a corner and ducked into a room that smelled of salt and turpentine. Framed photos hung everywhere, but not of people, of cliffs. Empty, jagged, familiar. Her breath hitched. Every photograph showed the same view from slightly different angles. The same spot where they'd stood earlier that night. She slammed the door and twisted the lock, but the latch gave little comfort. Her hands trembled as she scanned the room for another way out. A window, half-boarded, a rusted vent, anything. On a workbench, she saw a half-open box filled with memory cards and old cameras. One screen flickered weakly. When she pressed play, the footage showed a woman crying on the cliffs. The same scarf. The same trembling smile. The camera panned left, revealing a figure approaching her. The screen went black. The door handle rattled. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal tripod, and braced herself. His voice came through, low and coaxing. "You're overreacting. I just want to talk." The calm in his tone was worse than shouting. The lock snapped. The door opened slowly. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the fear in her eyes and the quiet calculation in his. "You shouldn't have gone through my things," he said. Her grip tightened. She swung. The impact sent him staggering back, blood tracing a thin line down his temple. She didn't wait to see if he'd recover. Sprinting through the hallway, she darted toward the kitchen, grabbing a heavy flashlight from the counter. The front door was bolted shut, the locks unfamiliar and new. Rain lashed against the windows. Behind her came a groan, then a laugh. Low, steady, closer than it should have been. "You hit harder than she did," he said. Her pulse hammered. She whispered, but he only smiled. She found the back door. Chained, but not locked. The chain clinked softly as she lifted it, praying the sound would drown beneath the storm. A crash from the living room froze her. The photographs had fallen, all of them, hundreds scattering like broken memories. She turned the handle, forcing the door open just enough to slip through. The cold rain hit her skin like needles. Then his voice rose behind her, closer now, furious. "Lena!" She ran into the night, barefoot, her breath lost to the wind. Rain turned the world into silver noise. She sprinted along the cliffs, her shoes lost somewhere behind her, the mud sucking at every step. The storm swallowed her screams. The beam from the lighthouse flashed intermittently. Her only guide, her only hope. But behind her, she could still hear him. Not running, but walking. His footsteps deliberate, steady, patient. Every time she looked back, the flash of lightning showed him closer. She slipped, catching herself on a jagged rock. Blood smeared her palm. She had no time to feel pain. She reached the edge of the cliff, panting, the sea roaring below like an animal. "Stay away from me," she shouted, her voice snatched by the wind. He slowed, his silhouette framed by stormlight, eyes unreadable. "You don't understand," he said. "They wanted to leave. I gave them something permanent." His tone was almost mournful, like he believed it. Her heart hammered. "You're sick," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I'm an artist." She took a step back, the ground softening beneath her heel. One wrong move and she'd fall. His words came closer, carried by wind and thunder. "Don't you see, Lena? Don't you see? You're perfect for the last frame." He raised the camera from around his neck, rain sliding down its metal body. Her mind flashed through the moments of the night. The candlelight, the wine, the scarf, the locked door. "No," she said quietly, shaking her head. "You don't get to choose how my story ends." He pressed the shutter. Click, but no flash came. The camera jammed. For the first time, his composure cracked. She saw his hesitation and lunged. The flashlight, still in her hand, struck his shoulder. He stumbled, shouting, the camera flying into the mud. It cracked open, spilling film like dark ribbons. They struggled, sliding dangerously close to the cliff's edge. His grip locked around her wrist. "You don't get to leave," he growled. "None of them do." The ground gave way beneath them. They fell together, tangled, until she grasped a jutting rock. He dangled from her arm, his face lit by a flicker of lightning. Fear and fury mixed. "Help me," he gasped. For a moment she hesitated. Rain poured into her eyes. Her muscles screamed. "You didn't help them," she said through gritted teeth. His hand slipped. He fell, swallowed by the roar of the ocean. She dragged herself up, trembling, mud-streaked, and stared into the black waves. Somewhere below, the tide erased him. Morning came quietly, as if the storm had never happened. The cliffs were calm again, washed clean by the rain. She walked barefoot through the wet grass, her trench coat heavy with salt and mud. The sea looked peaceful, deceitfully so. Below, waves broke over the rocks where he'd vanished. The air smelled of iron and seaweed. She didn't cry. There was nothing left to fear, and nothing left to understand. For the first time all night, the silence wasn't threatening. It was merciful. By the time she reached the road, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone had found the open door, the broken glass, the scattered photographs. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, though the wind had softened. The headlights appeared through the fog, a patrol car slowing to a stop. An officer stepped out, coat flapping, eyes cautious but kind. "Miss, are you hurt?" he asked. She only shook her head. He glanced at the house behind her and drew a slow breath. "You should tell me everything." Inside the house, officers moved carefully through the wreckage. Shattered frames, spilled film, overturned furniture. Every corner told a story of panic and obsession. They gathered photographs in evidence bags, faces of women who never left. One of them called out, "There's something in the dark room." Beneath the overturned table, an old reel-to-reel recorder still hummed faintly, its tapes spinning in endless loop. A man's voice played softly. "Every frame deserves truth." Later, wrapped in a blanket, she sat in the back of the patrol car. The sea still whispered beyond the cliffs. She stared out the window as the house faded behind her, the place where charm became violence, where art became madness. The officer spoke quietly into his radio, but she didn't listen. Her fingers traced the scarf still around her neck, damp and knotted. She thought about the photograph he'd taken and whether it still existed somewhere in that ruined darkroom. She hoped not. Weeks later, the police returned the recovered items: her phone, her coat, her bag. One sealed envelope contained a single photograph they'd found in the wreckage. It wasn't torn or burned like the others. It showed the cliffs at sunset, no people, just the horizon and light. On the back, in his handwriting, 3 words: for the last frame. She placed it face down in a drawer and closed it gently. Some stories didn't need to be remembered. Some memories were better left undeveloped.